something that's like really meaningful for me, and I do enjoy the job I have, but
all right, well, hello and good afternoon to everybody. If you would just take a moment, double check to make sure that you are muted. And if you need to mute yourself, just go right on ahead. I know we are often multitasking during these calls, and we need to make sure that we want to keep those tasks to ourselves. So unless you'd like us all to help with you, that I'm sure we'd all be happy with that. So I was just commenting to my colleagues that with it being October and everything going on, we know that we have conferences and fall breaks happening at this time. We also know that everyone is just finishing up this first quarter and is just running on fumes. A little bit myself, I will confess, I did forget to send out a reminder newsletter for this event. So my apologies if that did catch you off guard. But we do constantly have these dates posted throughout the year on the website. So if you have a colleague or a friend who says, I forgot, I missed it, I didn't get it, we will have the recording posted as we always do on the RSA coordinator website so that we can get that taken care of. Thank you. I see many of you already signing in so that we kind of have an idea of who is here today. I am joined today by two of my colleagues who always help us out. Sharon Morgan is our Director of Elementary ELA, and she is manning the chat. So she is often dropping in links and answers to specific questions that are happening in that chat, as well as Brenda Beamer Chapman, who is our Director of Social Studies, but also does so much to help with our RSA literacy. She's been doing a lot with RSA plans. So if you deal anything with the plans, you've probably been hearing from Brenda lately because she has taken the lead on making sure we're getting those read through and approved. We do have the link to our agenda. It is being posted in the chat, but I know with people signing in, it tends to get buried. So we're getting it posted again for you so that you have access to that. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and share it so that you can also see it on your screen. All right, there we go. Brenda, are we able to see that okay? Can you give me a, thank you. So as you are familiar, we also, I saw Alexa Hudak on the phone, on the call. Alexa is our program specialist from special education and one of our many colleagues here at SDE who is helping specifically around identifying reading difficulties, including characteristics of dyslexia. And I don't know if Kristen Perez-Rickles has made it on the call or not either. I know she's been pretty busy lately, another one of our colleagues. So it's helpful to know, and we have at the top of the agenda, all 5 of our names linked to our email, that any of us are able to help with questions, especially when it comes to around screening or helping to identify or assist students with reading difficulties. If one of us doesn't know the answer, we communicate between the 5 of us, and between 5 of our brains, we can usually get it for you. So just know that you've got that in your back pocket. Sometimes it's helpful to have more than just one address in case one of us is out or busy and you need to get an answer a little more quickly. If you have questions today that you would like to for us to address, if you'll go ahead and start dropping those in the chat, and then we will stop at strategic times today to make sure that we are addressing some of those questions if we need to do them live. Or like I said, Sharon does an amazing job of monitoring that chat, and sometimes she's able just to give you that link that you need right there. Okay, so RSA reports, we are finishing up our fall reporting season. Reporting season for RSA is always a fun time since we have 3 reports that are due concurrently. But we are in the middle of our 3rd grade promotion retention report. It is due at the end of this month. If you will recall, on single sign-on, it is located on the Wave. So you will have to log into the Wave, go into your school. It only preloads the names of students who did not meet RSA criteria on the OSTP last year for 3rd grade. So we get a lot of calls when we get that report open saying all of my 3rd grade students are there. I have 30 3rd grade students and I only see 5. You only had 5 that did not meet RSA criteria, and those are the only 5 that you need to report on. We have had multiple districts contacting us lately about having students entered twice on that. If you will just let us know that's a problem. We have a programmer at OMES who has been doing a phenomenal job of getting on that right away and getting that fixed so that you can get your report completed. So if that's a problem that you're still running into, it's nothing you're doing wrong, just shoot me an email and I will make sure that we get that to the programmer and we can get that fixed for you pretty quickly. While we are talking about third grade promotion retention, are there any questions just real quickly that came up about that report or any other reports that we need to address? And we can always come back to that. Nothing. I know Brenda's frantically going through the chat to see if there's anything.
I actually have one.
Paula, okay.
So we got a message about our annual district reading plan that said some of the funding was incorrect. Are there 2 parts of funding on that report? And keep in mind, I don't have access to it. This is secondhand knowledge.
Sure thing.
We checked the site portion of our plan and it had been approved by OSDE, but the email said the district funding and it listed some things.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Paula.
Okay.
So remember, yeah, there's that site portion, just like you remembered that you have access to as the school user or the site user or the principal. And then there's the district side of that plan that the superintendent or a district user has access to. If you have received an email about funding, it is likely on that district side. There is a question that is asking you to identify what program or professional development you will use for the 10% of your funding if you receive more than $2,500 in RSA funds. And so on the RSA coordinator website, which is what you see on your screen right now, about halfway down, you'll see where it says RSA funding, and you'll see the 50 programs that are currently approved for use for that 10% of funds. Remember, and this bears repeating over and over and over again, this is not required professional development for all of your teachers. This is a requirement for funding. So if as a district you receive $3,000 in RSA funding, 10% would be $300. How are you going to spend that $300? It could be towards registration for one teacher to participate in this. Maybe you have a teacher who's wanting to learn more, or a grade level team who's wanting to delve into some things together. It could be for stipends to complete something that is done outside of contract time. It can be used to pay for subs if it's something during contract time. So some of these things that are listed that do not have a district cost, for example, letters, if you are going through the Science of Reading Academies and do not have a district cost, but your teacher is wanting to attend during the contract day rather than the evening or Saturday, you can use that money to pay for a sub, or if they're attending outside of contract hours, could provide a stipend at that time. So Paula, the email that you received needs to go to your person who's responsible for the district side of your plan. And we'd be happy to help them out with specifics on that if they want to give one of us a call, either me or Brenda.
Okay, thank you so much for your help. I appreciate that.
Not a problem. So I know that can be really confusing. That is a new requirement this year. And whenever we have a new requirement, it takes us a couple of years to get things settled in and really kind of understand it. So we're kind of working with that. Brenda, was there anything else on the chat about reporting for right now?
I mean, there's a dyslexia screening process question, but no report questions.
Let me hold on to that screening process question for just a moment. So with reporting finishing up, we have RSA allocations that we are getting ready to send out. And I know this is also when we're going to know when is our money coming? When can we do something with this? Just so you know the timeline, all the reading plans have to be reviewed and approved, and all of the beginning of year reports have to be certified before we're able to send that information to state aid. Just so you know where we currently are, As of this morning, all of our reading plans have currently been initially reviewed. We are now awaiting some corrections. So if you have received one of those emails from me or Sharon or Brenda, most likely Brenda, she's done the bulk of that. If the sooner we get those corrections made, the sooner we can get that approved and get everybody out their money. What our goal is to have all of this done and the information to state aid by the end of this month, so that we can get that out in the next allocation for early November. If you'll recall, the last few years, it's been mid-December before we've been able to get that out. So we are running about a month to 6 weeks ahead of schedule, which is wonderful. I know we're still trying to get it out as fast as we can, but if you are not sure if your reports have been completed or certified, you might want to give that a quick check, or if you're hearing from us, that's why we want to make sure that we're getting that taken care of as quickly as possible. Have been receiving a few questions lately about how that allocation is determined. So I've kind of written out just a brief narrative of that formula for figuring out the allocation. Keeping in mind that the RSA is a line item in our state budget that is approved by the legislature each year. So OSDE presents a proposed budget to the legislature, but the legislature is the one who actually determines the amount that will be in that line item. This year it is $13 million that is in that line. Once all districts have submitted their beginning of year report where you've identified the number of students in K through 3 who are at risk for reading difficulties, that number is added up for all 925 K through 3 elementary sites so that we get a final number, and then divided into that total sum of money of 13 million. So that determines a per pupil allocation. Oh, sounds like somebody needs to mute real quick. And let's see if I can take care of that. There we go. Okay, so that money is divided into that full total budget so that we have a per pupil allocation. The last couple of years, the per pupil allocation has been around $122. So then that's multiplied again by the number of at-risk students that you had. So if you had 100 students that you determined were to be at risk for reading difficulties, 122 times 100 would be 12,200, and that would be your total allocation for the district. This is a one-time deposit into your account from state aid, and we will send out notification when that has been provided. So we monitor that. Again, we do not do claims as we do some other projects. That is monitored through OCAS codes. And then finally, allowable expenditures. So when you do have that funding, what can you spend it on? It's always good to remember the purpose of these funds, and it is to provide support to students in grades K through 3 who are struggling with reading. So all funds should have a direct effect on student reading and making that improvement. So there have been times that we've had calls saying, can we purchase a rug for the carpet for kids to come down for circle time? That's really a helpful tool to have in the classroom, but it does not have a direct effect on how students are able to read. So that would not be something we would want to spend our RSA funds on. That needs to come from another funding source. Books for students to use, intervention programs, salaries for interventionists, stipends for teachers who are providing after school tutoring, those types of things. And that's, again, not an exhaustive list. You will find an approved funding checklist with OCAS codes on the RSA coordinator website. We've also provided a direct link for you here. And finally, just that reminder, during COVID, the last few years, we have had an exception made when it came to technology and RSA funds. So it is allowable for RSA funds to be used for different subscriptions that are used for reading services. But we've had a lot of, with shifting to remote learning so quickly, we had so many schools that were needing to provide technology hardware, such as laptops and tablets, to their students for remote learning. And so we provided an exception in that case. That exception's now expired. So any technology hardware, such as tablets, laptops, things like that, does need to be purchased with other funding. Okay. All right. So anything, Brenda, with going back to reports or with funding that we need to address right away?
I don't see any questions about reports or funding.
Okay, I have imagined most of your questions are about screening. So let's just go back to our screening. I've all just taken the information that we talked about last month and made sure that we had it again here. I don't usually try to repeat the information in our agenda since it's building on one another, but this one needed to be there both times. So just that reminder that we did provide a timeline extension for screening for dyslexia this year, with this being the first year of implementation, and some confusion we had with how our understanding of some of the products that we had from our publishers and with trying to get that information out to districts. We felt that it was in the best interest of our students and of our teachers to be able to have a little more time to implement that screening. So if there was any confusion about that screening, we have provided for districts that if you need to do that up and through the mid-year window, that would be fine, and making sure that we follow up with families within 30 days of completing the rest of that screening assessment. We will be back on the recommended timeline next year and making sure that we have that a little more concise, because we don't, as a general rule, want to wait until midway through the year to identify students who have needs and making sure that we're getting those needs too met. But as we're learning a new process, sometimes we just need to give ourselves a little time and grace. And so that's what we have done this year. Just a reminder here that we do have the implementation guidance for early literacy screening. A lot of the questions that we have been getting lately are in this more comprehensive guidance. It is a little bit longer, but it does have a lot of different charts here. Encompasses both RSA screening and screening for characteristics of dyslexia. You'll also notice, as we are in the middle of IPRI time, and try not to scroll too fast and make somebody a little ill here. But one of the things that we did know that is a struggle is trying to provide assistance for families, especially on that area of the individualized program of reading instruction, or IPRI, of how parents can help their kids at home who are struggling. And a lot of times what we will see is to read for 20 minutes, which we always want to help recommend that our parents are reading with their kids, but sometimes there's some things that they can do a little bit beyond that to maybe help on specific areas where they might need assistance. And so with some colleagues at the Department of Education in Arizona, they were kind enough to share some of the ideas that they had already built for the same purpose in their state. They identified some of these different strategies for these areas. So if you have a student that, let's say, is struggling with early phonological awareness skills, like identifying words within a sentence or rhyming or segmenting and blending syllables, these are some specific things that you could send home with a parent. I would not copy all of these pages and say do everything, but maybe pick 2 or 3 specific activities that a parent might do to help their child with some of these types of skills. Okay, you'll see for each of these large areas, we have, like, for letter recognition, for spelling, for working with high frequency words. Rather than just saying practice your sight words, here's 2 different ways that you can give that would be specific to a parent to help a child practice that we know would be more effective for them. Okay, so it's just helpful to remember that we do have some of those resources available to us. With screener-specific technical guidance, again, you'll find these on the RSA Coordinator webpage. Let's get back to that real quick. There we go. You'll find under early literacy screening that we have our list of approved screeners, and those you'll see these are linked. I know that some of these have changed a little bit even since our last meeting. We have some wonderful publishers who have met with us, and sometimes multiple times, to make sure that we are all on the same page with meeting the requirements of the state law, and to make sure that we as an OSDE team knew enough about the product to be able to support our districts. So it had taken just a bit. You will notice some of these changes. I'll just pick one and click on that. For each of these, you'll find the contact information. So if you have specific questions about a screener, the best bet you could probably do is to make sure that you're calling the contact information for the screening instrument, because they are actually the experts on that product. We know enough to be dangerous here at OSDE and see that process, but when it comes to where do we find this particular piece of information on a report, that's where you're really going to want the publisher to help you with that. This is information that was provided to us by the publisher, so that we wanted to make sure that we represented their product correctly. But you'll notice on each of these for the dyslexia screener, there's an assessment pathway for each of the grade levels, and how we use this. One of the things that's different from the dyslexia screener than what we had with the RSA screener was with the RSA screener, just about every single one of them, just about, provides a composite score so that there was one number to look at. That's not the case with the dyslexia screeners. And that's really kind of one of the things that caused us a bit of a headache at the beginning of this year. Is so a lot of times we're looking at that composite, but we're also looking at additional subtests and having to figure out how these work together. So what we've tried to do on each of these is provide some chart at the beginning to say, is the student at risk or for the characteristics of dyslexia? Or is the student demonstrating reading difficulties, but really not at risk for characteristics of dyslexia at this time? That's not to say that that student may not come up later on and say, hey, we've got more of an issue, they're just not showing up yet. We know that if we're at this point, this student has a reading difficulty. No, just we're done at that point, because they do know that based off of our RSA screener. What we're trying to do with this is we're trying to pinpoint, are there characteristics of dyslexia? And if you'll recall from previous conversations, that means that this is a student who's struggling with word recognition skills such as phonemic awareness or phonics, or struggling with processing those sounds. So processing the sound and connecting it to print and getting it out there. So remember the RAM, which you'll see on all of our screeners, that rapid automatized naming is measuring processing. The others are measuring specific skills within that word recognition domain. Okay, so what we're looking for, are they struggling with all of those areas, or is this maybe something where they need to work more on the language comprehension side, or they need to work on the fluency, but we're not seeing everything coming together yet for characteristics of dyslexia. Please be aware too, as this year is moving on, that we are having continuing ongoing conversations with different teachers and district leaders who are implementing these screenings to let us know what has worked well, what has not worked well, where do our continuing questions lie, so that we can adjust any guidance that needs to be adjusted, or if we need to recommend to our legislature for any legislative changes, either this year or in following years, we can get that taken care of. So as we worked through this year, just from some of the conversations we've had, we feel we're in a bit better place. We're not perfect yet, and I don't know that that's a goal that we will ever achieve, but we're working towards it. But we are going to make sure that we do have the information that we need a little bit better next time. Keeping in mind on the IPRI that we have available, where we are reporting out for our students who are struggling with reading difficulties. On this second page, you'll see that results for screening of characteristics of dyslexia. In other words, are they at risk or not at risk for those characteristics, and what else might we need to do? So we need to either use that to inform our intervention plan initially, such as what we're doing here, or if we needed to wait and use that extended timeline that was available to us, and we can always jot down that we've had to wait a bit until we get that done. Remember, we've got a place we can check here. Screening for characteristics of dyslexia has not yet been completed. We can get back to that. Come back down and change in our addendum to this. We don't need to fill this out unless we needed to do our screening after we finished our IPRI. So those of you having conferences this week or next week, you finished your IPRI but have not finished your dyslexia screening. Let's say you decided as a district that this needed to take place a little later. due to getting your head wrapped around all of the screening requirements, then this addendum can be written rather than having to do a whole new IPRI, because that's a longer document. This one-page document can be done just to say, here's how we are going to shift our intervention plan. One way or the other, we need to report out to parents that, yes, we have this and we are either at this screening done, we're either at risk or not at risk for characteristics of dyslexia. Both documents and anything else has this in writing. This is a reminder that this screening is not a diagnosis of dyslexia. We are not diagnosing anything. We do not want to send families to their pediatricians because, first of all, pediatricians would not know what to do with this to begin with if they are worth their salt. This is an educational issue. So one of the questions that has continued to come up is, what do we do with a parent or a family that says, okay, where do I go for a diagnosis, or where do I go for testing? The first thing we want to do is really encourage the family to allow the intervention to take place. We are providing an intervention through our general education classroom. There is not a specific dyslexia intervention that we're doing right now, okay? But we have, based off of the screening like we have done in the past, know that we have students that have specific needs. This assessment is providing us more information as to the needs of that student, why they are at risk for reading difficulties. And we know that students who are at risk for characteristics of dyslexia are there because they are struggling with those skills, phonemic awareness and phonics, and need some direct instruction in those areas. In some cases, that student who has not received or really taken in that instruction before can get that and take off, and they'll be fine because they've either missed a lot of school was out, they've had to move a lot, they had 5 different subs, long-term subs throughout last year, they missed that instruction. A variety of reasons that we know are common throughout our state and really beyond. For students who are receiving that really good targeted intervention, and we know we're hitting their needs and they're not making that progress, that's when that's why it's so important that we're monitoring their progress. If we're not seeing that progress being made, that would be a time to have the conversation with your administrator of, do we need to do a review of existing data? Do we need to bring in additional experts, such as our special education teachers, psychometrists, psychologists, whoever that helps with that further evaluation, to say, do we need to look at this data and decide, is this warranted or not? Okay, so there's not anywhere that we would send a student to go get testing. We would do some of that further evaluation at the school, but the first thing we want to try to do is let those interventions take place and monitor their progress so that we can make sure that that progress is being made. Alexa, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Is there anything that you want to add to that process or my explanation?
My video is not working. Wait, my video may be working. Can you see me?
We can.
So we're talking about, a referral process. We have referral processes pretty clearly outlined in our policies and procedures. And so when you're identifying students that you may determine could qualify for special education, or you may have parents requesting evaluation, those procedures are laid out in our policies and procedures guide.
Right. And just to reiterate, that's not our first step, right? When we have done our screening, our first step
Correct.
is not to go to a referral. Our first step is to provide good quality instruction and intervention and to monitor that progress and then see how are we doing. If we're not responding to intervention, then we might want to take through that step, correct?
Correct. The only instance in which you may want to expedite the next step, which would be a review of existing data, is if you have a parent who is requested, and then you'll want to move along on that process. But again, just because a parent has requested an evaluation does not constitute an evaluation. So the team will need to look at that existing data and look and see if the student is making progress and determine if an evaluation is necessary at that time.
And if a district has questions on that, then they can either contact you or Kristen, or they can look at the policies and procedures handbook that's on the special education webpage, correct?
Correct.
Right. Thanks, Alexa. We appreciate you on that partnership. Okay, finally, I did see a couple of, just as I was skimming the chat, is there a letter for letting parents know about if they have characteristics of dyslexia? The information of letting parents know how their student is doing is on the IPRI. You do not have to do a separate letter. What we do have to do is make sure that parents have access to information and resources about dyslexia for their own information. And so that is, again, on the RSA coordinator webpage. This is just a 2-page flyer that says, for students who have been screened for dyslexia, this is something that we can provide for those families to let them know, this is the screening that took place. Here's what we're doing. We are looking for reading. What is this? What was the process? What does this mean? And again, we have said all over, and you'll notice it's bolded, not all students who have difficulty with these skills have dyslexia. We have really tried to make sure that parents are well aware. We are not saying that this is the case. I know that out of all those words, the only word they're hearing is that D word, but it's reassuring them. We are working on these skills. These are the skills they need to work on. And what we're going to see is, are they responding to that instruction, or do we need to provide more specialized instruction? Okay, so this is something that can be helpful in communicating that with parents. And you'll even see what are those next steps that kind of talks about, again, we want to try to let the intervention take place and see how the student is responding to that instruction before we try to move straight to any kind of full educational evaluation. Okay, so let me have it, Brenda. Where are we with questions?
There are just a couple of kind of specific questions. So
Sure.
if a student met benchmark in October, can they be disqualified from the dyslexia screening process? We have some who appeared to have summer regression in September, but they're now at benchmark.
A fair question. So what I would say in that is that if when your dyslexia screening process takes place, so you did your beginning of your benchmark in September, the student met that grade level target in October, but you're not going to do your dyslexia screening, let's say, till December. If that's the case, then at that time, where is that student? And if they are, if you're giving that beginning of year screening at that time, or that mid-year screening at that time, and they're still meeting the target, then no, you don't need to do the additional screening for dyslexia. If they bounced up in October, but then by the time you're doing it at mid-year, they're back down below that target again, yes, you need to give it at that time. So I would take it based off of when you're doing that screening, how is that child doing at that time? Okay.
Okay, if a student who was probationary promoted to 4th grade and scored the spring benchmark for 4th grade on STAR, do we still mark probationary promotion on the IPRI, or are they off probationary promotion?
They're off of probationary promotion at that time. And if you'll recall, I'll just put these down here, for those students that are, just in case we've got anybody new on the call, for students who were promoted from 3rd to 4th grade through that good cause exemption, or that committee, that student reading proficiency team committee, they are required to still be provided intensive intervention. And we need to make sure that we are monitoring that or documenting that in some way. So we do have, well, it's going to be slow coming up today, isn't it? Let's see if we can't get to it this way a little faster. We do have down here the documentation of ongoing intervention for 4th and 5th grade. Okay. So the question being, I have a 4th grade student who just was promoted with that committee. They need the intensive intervention, but now they are showing that they are on grade level through one of the state approved screeners. Are they still on probationary promotion? No, they are not. So once they are able to demonstrate grade level reading ability through one of the approved reading assessments, which is why on the universal screening guidance, you'll notice that goes up through the end of 5th grade as far as those grade level targets, then you are able to remove them from that. And then they are now under local control. So if that student later on shows that they need reading support, then that would be whatever processes you have in place as a district for any student beyond 3rd grade who might need reading support. Brenda, anything else?
Do we need to complete the documentation of promotion eligibility through the screener for all students or only the ones who failed to meet criteria? In the past, we've just filed a copy of the 3rd grade proficiency notice.
Okay, let's see. I was trying to kind of follow some of that. Is the question, do we need to complete the dyslexia screening or do we need to complete an IPRI for students who are below the grade level target?
Good question. I don't know. That's Sheila.
Sheila, you want to unmute and help me out? She may not be where she's able to unmute right now. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a little bit, or we'll get back with Sheila with specifics on that one.
I think the only other question I have is about the STAR. So the STAR states score below 40%, you then give the STAR literacy. And if that is below 40, you give the CBM. Is that correct?
That is correct. So let's pull this up for just a moment, because I know that the majority of our districts do use STAR, and I know that we've had a lot of conversations with Renaissance. They've been very helpful with us. And as a matter of fact, just sent over in the last couple of days, they did do a webinar for districts that use their product to really walk through that guidance. And we did attach it onto this technical guidance to make this a little bit easier. So one of the things they did that was very helpful is they have a flow chart for every single grade. Okay, so you'll see this is for grades K and 1. You would always start with that early literacy. Are they above the 40th percentile? If yes, no further testing is needed. No, then they would do the rapid naming and also create the IPRI and moving on from there. So they give you a nice flow chart of exactly how this would look. Okay, so if you are, if they had a student who is in 2nd and 3rd grade, they start with STAR reading. If they are showing difficulty by being below the 40th percentile on STAR reading, then they go to STAR early literacy. Keep in mind this way, the way STAR is set up, STAR reading is working with connected text. It's looking at passages. STAR early literacy is looking at more of the word recognition level. Okay, so if we have a student who is struggling with the longer text, then we want to back them up to looking at the word recognition part to see, are they struggling with being able to read the words accurately, of being able to separate the sounds and blend the sounds, those types of things. If they're able to do that, then they probably are, let me back up and find my words. If they're struggling on STAR reading, so they're below the target, but they are above that target on STAR early literacy, then likely the area of help and support that they need are in the areas of fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. They are probably not struggling with the word recognition because they are able to do that when the words are in isolation. When you put them into context with the passages, that's when they are struggling. So based off of that information, that's why we're saying you don't need to move forward with the rest of it, because we can see they can do this on the individual word level. They were struggling with the passages. So you might double check this to see if this is helpful for you. Okay. And then remember, that's part of this larger guidance that we have. So we also have all of this spelled out as well. If you're still struggling with getting that question answered, shoot one of us an email and we will help you with that. Okay. Brenda?
So probably a question for Alexa. If a student received intervention for dyslexia and have had further evaluation and you're still not seeing any progress for the student, what is the next step?
So if you're not seeing progress, they've had intervention, they've not been identified already as an IEP, as a student who's eligible for an IEP, the team may consider further evaluation. Those steps are outlined in our policies and procedures. The team will start with a review of existing data and include that information regarding interventions that have already been completed, as well as any assessments that have already been taken.
And Alexa, I would imagine that the progress monitoring data is going to be some of the most valuable data that they have. So that's one of the reasons districts that it's really important that we get those progress monitoring data points in so that we can see how is response, because 1 or 2 data points is not going to be sufficient to figure out if it's really working or not, right?
Okay, the only other question I have at the moment is if new students move into the district during the year, do we do dyslexia screening with them if they don't meet the requirements of the universal screener?
So because of the way the statute is written, it is not required in law that you do that. It would be a good idea because it would provide you more information, but that would at that point be a decision made at the local level.
That's all the questions.
That's
that
all
I
the
have.
questions? Okay. Well, I'll keep talking and I'm sure we'll have a few more come up because we always do. You saw me pull up just a little bit ago, the IPRI, those individualized program of reading instruction documents. We did have a couple of broken links. I did just check them this morning. They should all be working at this point. So we do have for all 3 of these printable, fillable, and then editable versions. If you do decide to edit any of these, please make sure that you are aware that all of the requirements for the each of those documents and for the written notification to parents are included because that does become the responsibility of the district if those edits are made. And just that reminder of where it is in statute of why we would need to continue past 3rd grade and that documentation for intervention. Finally, we get a lot of questions every year about the mid-year promotion policy. That has actually been around since we started the promotion retention process through RSA back in 2012 was when the law was passed, and 2014 was when it first became active. Every district is required to have a policy for mid-year promotion for retained students in 3rd grade. Remember that policy does have to be provided to parents through that as part of that written notification, which is why it is on the IPRI. I know that when that first happened, I knew there was a big push, and it is something that the district has to provide to the accreditation office every year as part of their accreditation review. So I would imagine that it does exist in every district, but if you are a teacher or a coordinator who is new to your job, you may not be fully aware of that. So you would probably want to check with your superintendent's office or whoever holds onto those policies in your district to make sure that you have access to that. It is keeping in mind that there is a date. It is coming up for any mid-year promotions that are to be made. It has to be completed prior to November 1. And the requirement is that these are for students who are now reading at or above grade level targets and ready to be promoted to 4th grade, and making sure that they are ready in all content areas, not just in reading. So this is the text from the administrative rule on mid-year promotion that talks about that policy, but the actual administrative rule is 2 to 3 pages long, and you can find that direct link right here so that you can make sure that you're up to date on what that expectation is. Okay, so we can't ever leave our meetings without a couple of resources and professional development opportunities. So while you're thinking about if you have any additional questions we need to address, I'm just going to throw these out for you. First of all, as we're talking with parents at this time of year, it's always good to remember the resources available for supporting your child's reading at home. And partners at the Regional Education Laboratory in the Southeast part of the country, which is known as REL Southeast, last year put together some really nice packets with videos and activities for families as they practice those foundational skill readings at home. So I'll just show you, you can find this. It looks at like this, and you'll see there's for K, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. These are quite extensive. I had just the kindergarten one printed out because that was the one that came out first. It's about 150 to 200 pages long. It's a lot. But it is a lot of great information and brief videos that you can provide to parents. So you'll see the different chapter menus that gives them some great information about how they're developing language, linking those sounds to letters, blending letters, things like that. So those 4 recommendations for each of those things, and you'll find the different videos and family activities. So let's say we're working on rhyming. So here's some different things they can do, videos to show them how to do this, some of those key points, and then the actual PDF of these activities. So again, ways to connect our families, things to do at a family literacy night if you're wanting to showcase some of these different activities, maybe have some of these things printed off, if these are the things that we're going to do. And even some of these that you could use in your own classroom, maybe it's a quick small group instruction or showing them how to do that so that when they get home, they can teach their parents how to do these activities and provide some additional practice opportunities for them on these foundational skills. So another great resource that can help out with that, where we don't have to reinvent the wheel or go look things up. They've done it for us. Also, on our own OSDE, the State Systemic Improvement Plan, which is actually a lot of Alexa's work, through their work are developing Tier 1 universal supports for all of our K-3 students. So there is a module in our OSDE Connect that you can access, but you can also go to their ESIP website. I'll just quickly show you that. So if you're not sure what this is really a focus on K-3 reading, so very directly related to what we're doing in our classrooms. But you'll find universal support through ESIP. So universal, just like we do with our tiers with our students. Tier 1 means that this is helpful for all of our schools. And you'll see where you are able to enroll in OSDE Connect. This does not cost anything. It provides some great professional development of ways that you can support students in early reading in those early grades. With professional development, some opportunities coming up. Both are free, which is always nice. Judy Dodson is going to be giving a talk about the science of talk. So talking about our earliest learners and the importance of that speaking and listening standard, our first standard that so often gets overlooked. But it's also the foundation for all of the reading and writing that our little ones are doing. This is sponsored by the Reading League Oklahoma on Thursday, November 3rd in the evening. It is virtual, so you can find the online registration link. It is free to attend. The recording is made available to members of that organization. So you can contact them if you would like to have more information about how to get recordings. Also, again, as other states are able to do some things as well, Oregon has an RTI, a response to intervention and instruction reading symposium that they do. They did their first one last year. They did a great job. They're coming back again for a second go around. It is completely free and virtual. So they do have a link to register if you are planning on attending live, because they're on Pacific time. It falls in the middle of our day rather than in the morning, which is what they have scheduled. But on Thursday, December 8th, but I realize a lot of us will be in the classroom or working with students at that time. So you don't have to register to get the recordings. After a few days, after December 8th, you can go to their website and they will have the recordings available for you for free. So there's no need to register if you do not plan on attending live. You can just go pick up those recordings a little bit later. Their keynote speaker is Emily Hanford, who is a journalist who has done a lot with bringing to light about early reading instruction lately with her group called APM Reports and several podcasts. They also have Holly Lane, who is the director for the Florida, it's the University of Florida Literacy Institute. I know I'd remember it in a moment. That is Dr. Holly Lane, who has done a lot with that. And she's done actually a lot with virtual learning and foundational reading. So she'll be another heavily attended speaker on that as well. So if you have an opportunity, that would be a really good resource to go back through. And then as always, our recording of this meeting will be on our RSA coordinator webpage up at the very top, along with the schedule for remaining meetings for this year. So we'll have that lit up as soon as we get that recording back. Okay, Brenda, anything else that we need to hit in that chat?
There was just one request for you to repeat instructions for students who are duplicated on the promotion and intention report.
Absolutely. So if you have students who are duplicated, if you would please just send me an email so that I know your school and your district and that's the problem that you're having, that you have students duplicated on your report. I will make sure that the programmer at OMIS has that information, and he can usually fix it pretty quickly.
There was one last question about, and I'm not quite sure, maybe they can explain it further, but could you explain further the PD that is offered on the website, especially for dyslexia?
Okay. Frankie, are you asking about the professional development that is offered on OSDE Connect, or the professional development that is required as part of your 10% of your RSA allocation?
They're required.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me scroll back down to our RSA coordinator page. Okay, and we have pulled out the wording that's in the statute here so that you'll have this. So beginning this year, districts that receive more than $2,500 in RSA funds, I realize you don't have your funding yet, but you can make a good, fairly decent estimate off of last year's allocation. They needs to spend at least 10% of those funds on professional development in the science of reading. So these are, the statute did direct OSDE to develop a list of approved programs. So that took place this last spring. We are getting ready to open this back up for more programs to submit for review and approval so that we can add on to this list as we keep moving forward. We won't take anything off right now. And you'll notice on this Airtable, it goes all the way across. So it gives you a lot of information about how much it costs, how long it takes, those types of things. What's it focused on? So like I might want to take a course that's focused only on phonics if that's something we're struggling with, or comprehensive deals with all those big five identified through the National Reading Panel. We've also have some on here that are dealing with just writing. So if there's some that you're saying, you know, we've got a lot of things in place. We've had a lot of teachers go through a lot of reading training, but maybe we need to enhance what we're doing with writing or some of our older students. This can be done for any teacher in pre-K through 5th grade. Once again, this is not a requirement for all teachers to be involved with this each year. This is not a yearly requirement for training. I realize it's on the list of required training, but the reason it's there is it's requirement for funding. It's a requirement that we spend a certain amount of funding, whether it's for one teacher or for 30 teachers, depending on what your funding and your needs are at the school. Okay. Brenda, anything else?
I think one more request to go back and show where you found this, where they can find the STAR guidance, the one with the flow charts, just where
All
you can
right.
find it.
Let's just
And
take
then
a quick
Sharon put
tour.
it in the chat, but just so they know where to find it.
Absolutely. So if you'll come to this RSA coordinator webpage, if you were going to bookmark a page, this would be the one I would bookmark, because this is where we tend to put a lot of the information that our coordinators that are really making sure that we are in compliance with the RSA. The forms that you need are here. So you'll start off on the RSA coordinator webpage with the monthly updates and Zoom meetings recordings. Then we'll come down to our timeline and assessment. So you'll see what our timeline is for completing reports. Okay, so that we know that we're getting those reports met. Oops, hit the wrong tab. There we go. And our the 4 different reports that we do for RSA with a tutorial for how to complete those. We have that quick guide for educators to make sure that our teachers understand what's required of them. Then we come into a section on early literacy screening. So we have the comprehensive guidance first, that large document that I showed you earlier. And then we have the specific to each of the vendors guidance for universal screening, which is what we do for RSA. And then the additional part for screening for characteristics of dyslexia. So you'll want to pull them both up together. So for example, if you use map reading fluency for universal, and for dyslexia, you'll want to put them up together and look at them kind of side by side because they tend to flow into one another. Some of you realize that if you use 4 of the different assessments, you do have to provide the past as a supplemental. So we've given the information about the past separately, but it is also incorporated into those 4 assessments as well. Okay. Then we'll come down a little bit further. Here's where we find out about RSA funding, that checklist, the requirement for professional development that we just went over. And then underneath this table, we'll find the sample documents that we would need to use with our students. So the individual program of reading instruction, or IPRI, in those different formats, printable, fillable, and editable, for both the main document, the addendum for dyslexia screening if it's needed, and the ongoing intervention past 3rd grade. We also have the family communication, so our family guide, any proficiency notice for 3rd grade, and then this document about that information and resources for students that are screened for dyslexia. For good cause exemption 4, we have that portfolio. So you have the information about the portfolio for 3rd grade students who are not at that grade level target yet and need to have a portfolio for possible promotion purposes. And then finally, we have a section dealing with promotion and retention decisions. As we move forward into the spring, I know this is the section that we're working on to see what we need to update and enhance before we get into that spring season of looking at promotion and retention decisions. Okay. And then you'll find the meetings from last year down here, as well as a little bit of information on fluency. So hopefully that helps you kind of remind what the resources are available to you on this webpage. Hey, Britta, anything? I see we've got 3 minutes left. Anything else?
I am putting the agenda link in the chat for someone, and that's all the questions that I have.
All right. Well, wonderful. Well, I hope everyone, if you've already had fall break, I hope it was relaxing for you. If you're getting ready to have it, I hope you have an amazing time. If nothing else, it's some time to put your feet up and relax a little bit, because I know you all are needing it. We've been feeling it around here, and I know you're feeling it in your school. So, but we've made it halfway through the first semester. So give yourselves a pat on the back. Go enjoy your favorite snack and beverage at some point. And thank you very much for all of the wonderful work you're doing with our students. We greatly appreciate you. If there's anything else that we can do for you, remember you have a team of us. So if, fortunately my emails have slowed down a little bit, which is wonderful, but if you are needing something pretty quickly, all 5 of us are ready and willing to help you. We text each other constantly when we say, I've got an email, we need to figure this out. So don't feel like you have to just sit one or the other. I would ask, if you're going to contact all of us, if you'll do it in one email. There's nothing more frustrating than puzzling through an email and knowing that there were 5 separate emails sent to all 5 of us, and then trying to figure out that they've got 5 answers. And we need to make sure that we're doing that. But we have a team that's able and willing to help you. So have a great fall, enjoy some nice weather, and we will see you next month. Bye, everybody.